Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity podcast, where I connect successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business community. Past guests include Melissa Jacobs, a growth strategist who helps companies use their marketing dollars more strategically by helping them understand their data, and Lizzie Mintis, who is building a top recruiting agency in the gaming industry where both client and the candidate feel valued and understood during the recruitment process. So if either of those episodes sound interesting to you, please make sure and go and check out our episodes on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode is brought to you by my company, Clara CFO Group. Clara CFO is dedicated to providing financial clarity and profit maximizing solutions to small businesses. The team at Clara CFO are seasoned accounting professionals with a heart for small business. We help growth-minded entrepreneurs thrive through fractional CFO services and financial education. To learn more about Clara CFO Group and how we can help your business, visit claracfo.com. Today's guest I met through a podcast guesting agency, Your Expert Guest. We had Julie Fry, the owner of Your Expert Guest, on the podcast a while back. Her agency is kind of like a matchmaking business for podcasts and potential guests. So if you want to go back and listen to that episode, you can go and check it out. And also, if you want to check out that company in particular, it's yourexpertguest.com. Today's guest is Karin Conroy. Karin is the founder of Conroy Creative Counsel, an award-winning recognized leader that has cracked the code of smart, sophisticated, and strategic marketing for law firms. Marketing Co-Counsel is the agency's signature program, which redefines the way that law firms do marketing. The plan provides a unified approach with a flat monthly fee to achieve next-level results. Karin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Hannah. I'm so excited about this. I feel like we could go on and on for hours. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, it was really fun to be on your podcast. So your podcast name is
Creative Counsel.
Counsel.
It's on the Legal Talk Network. So it's really aimed at lawyers, law firms, across all spectrums. And we talk specifically about marketing. And, lawyers went to law school, and marketing usually isn't a part of law school. And a lot of them are building these businesses and they don't know where to start. And it's kind of overwhelming, but they feel like they're super smart and they should be able to figure this out. And it's like, it's overwhelming. So that's where we come in.
Yeah, that's great. Because I know that, it's kind of like accountants. It's like all the things, like we go to school for a certain thing and, we're really good at it, really passionate, ready to go. And then you're like, now I need clients.
Right. Exactly. Well, and that's the challenge is like the marketing is like putting the cart before the horse or whatever the phrase is where I need clients, but I can't pay for the marketing and I can't pay for the marketing until I have clients. And so it's that's kind of step one where they can't figure out how to do the first thing if they don't have any money.
Yeah.
So
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to know, how did you get into this business, both in marketing and specifically working with law firms? How did that happen?
Well, it was just sort of, it was not the plan. Like there was no, I didn't lay it out in a spreadsheet and say, okay, and in this year I will do X or whatever. I used to be the director of marketing at Century 21. So, in this previous life, it was corporate. I was going into an office. I'm in Southern California. So during the previous recession, it started in real estate and in Southern California for the most part, with all the subprime lending, if we can remember back that far.
Yeah.
And so I was running this marketing department. We had the biggest Century 21 in the world. And then the recession hit, and the first place to go is the marketing department. Well, at the time I was getting my MBA. And so I had, even earlier in my life, worked at this little internet cafe. And so a lot of people that I know were also losing their jobs and starting law firms or businesses. And they knew that I knew how to put together websites. So I was doing this on the side while I was doing my MBA and, doing all that. And it just to try to summarize the story, it just kind of went from there. And pretty quickly, I realized that I could do that and be a lot more successful, have my own life, do my own schedule. this business is pretty sweet. Have very, very low overhead. I don't have any, you know, we all are virtual. My whole team is virtual. So we don't have any brick and mortar costs. We don't have any product. I don't have a store full of shirts or whatever the case might be. So while I was in my MBA kind of evaluating businesses, I could look at this and say, this is actually a good business model. I think this could be a good thing long term. I have two small kids, and it just really supports this kind of balance of life and being successful and kind of choosing my own path. So it kind of landed in my lap is the short answer.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, it's been really nice and ideal.
Yeah. Well, I think you need to give yourself a little more credit because it wasn't that it just landed in your lap. You were providing a service that was needed.
That's true. Yeah.
And when enough people tell you, hey, we need this service, you've
Yeah.
basically identified a business idea in that
That's
sense,
true. And the other very strategic thing that I did, and I recommend to everyone, is at the time, my marketing professor was this amazing professor who we got lucky to have, who was Ivy League qualified, but he wanted to live in Newport Beach, and so the school I went to for my MBA is right by Newport Beach, and so he told us, gave us all kinds of great tidbits, but his main thing is find where your clients are and then be there. And so the first thing I did was I found this site called Lawyerist, which at the time, this is when blogs were kind of a big thing. And I was guest posting. And so that was, if you can kind of remember what blogs used to be like,
right?
there used to be like these ones that you would go to that were full of guest posts. And once again, this was kind of in the previous recession. So there was a lot of lawyers guest posting, but I was the only one talking about marketing. And so I kind of cut through all this noise and had a lot of answers for people who were setting up law firms that that was not part of their plan. They were going to go to a big firm, and during this time big firms were not hiring. They were getting rid of people like
Right.
in mass. And so they were trying to figure this out real quick. Like, okay, if I'm going to start my own firm that was not part of the plan, how do I do that? So I was writing all these articles, and then I also very quietly, kind of not quietly, I advertised there, and that was how I started my whole business. Is just kind of being there, being present, answering questions, not being salesy, and that was kind of a main key there. But then also saying, hey, by the way, this is my agency, and I do have services if you need them.
Yeah. Sounds like that was effective.
It was. A lot of those clients I still have.
Oh,
So
wow.
that
Okay.
was, going on 15 years ago. And
Oh,
a lot of those clients have stuck around. Some have not. And I know we're going to kind of talk about setting up business, and I wanted to talk about like the evolution of all that. And so
yeah.
my evolution, some of those clients have not stuck around, and that's been a good thing
Yes.
because where I started and where I am now is two totally different places.
Which I think is very common when,
Yeah.
when you're a practitioner of something and then you go out on your own and you say, hey, I'm going to like do this for other people. It takes a while to figure out what is this service that I'm actually offering. So that was one of the things that kind of stuck out to me from your bio.
Yeah.
Was how you kind of you had a name of kind of the program that you do
Yeah.
now with people, your signature program, the Co-Counsel.
Yeah.
Is that the name of it?
Yes. Marketing Co-Counsel.
Marketing
Yes.
Co-Counsel,
Yeah.
which I think is brilliant, obviously from
Thank you.
from a naming
Yeah.
from a naming standpoint. And when you listen to the intro of your podcast, you kind of explain that a little bit. But
Yeah.
can you tell us kind of where you started out with
Yes.
providing services and then some of the things that you were sort of finding out as you served people?
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's the lifespan of businesses. And I don't look at those years and think that I was doing anything wrong because it worked. And that worked at that time. But that does not work for my life now, nor would I, because it was a lot of hustle and it
Yeah.
was a lot of churn. So, where I started when I was blogging on that site was I was advertising websites for $975. And so I was starting so from an MBA perspective, I was starting, my strategic positioning was on price. And that is, so when we did case studies in my MBA, that is the equivalent of the way Walmart positions themselves. Like they literally, we did case studies and whatever. So there's all these different places where you can position yourself, price, quality, all these other options. I started on price. Now, that's not horrible if you do that intentionally. It got a ton of people in the door, but they are all fixated on price, right? They're not looking at me for the value. That's not what they're coming in the door for. They are, give me my website, give it to me ASAP, and here's your $975. So luckily, at the time, there were like some firms that were concerned about price because we're in a recession, obviously, but they evolved also. So those are the guys that evolved with me. And they have now, there's been moments when I raised my prices over the last 15 years where they're like, what? And then I explain it and they stayed with me. There's some who did not, and that's okay. And that's the evolution process. So over time, I would hear signals like, why are you so cheap? And then they would be trying to sell, like if it was a firm with multiple lawyers or partners, whatever, they would be trying to explain to their partners why my price was so low. And I'm like, well, that's an easy problem. I'm happy to raise my prices.
Yeah.
So I usually just listened, and that's where I started to raise my price. Well, then I had to change my offer as well, because now it's not just like, let's just slap together a website and, you give me a check. And so I went through one major pivot point, which was about 5 years ago, where I also changed the name. So I originally started out as Conroy Consult, and that was me fresh out of MBA school thinking I was going to be a consultant.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, no, I am really targeting lawyers and law firms. And this is who I'm speaking to. And so I need to be more direct. And so that's when I became Conroy Creative Counsel. And I positioned myself as an expert. I had at this point been doing it for, I think, 8 or 9 years. And I had been featured on ABA, on publications for the ABA, all these different publications where I can support my expertise. I've got, the logos on my website that say the kind of thing that's sort of like as seen in.
Right.
And then I position myself as a more exclusive expert kind of consultation and product. And so I'm not for everyone. I'm not for some of those low cost people who can only afford that $975 website. And that's okay, because over time, the one thing I kind of learned was listening to all those red flags. And that was a really hard lesson to learn when you're initially talking to someone in a sales call and you're thinking, I'd really like to get this project, but there's all these red flags, and you just sort of like, stick your fingers in your ears and you're like, and then later, like that was not the right fit.
Right. I think it's part of I think you're right. It's part of the evolution of the business to kind of go through like what is the right thing to offer, what at the right price. Like I've never heard somebody who's come on to this podcast, or I've never heard any podcast that somebody said right out of the gate they've offered the right thing at the right price
No.
to the right customers. I've never ever heard that, and I don't think that that's realistic. Now you can do all the research and try to position yourself as best you can. You can set up your marketing to talk to the right people, but most of the time, most of us are just going to start doing it and figure it out.
Right. Yeah,
So,
and like I said, it was okay at that time because I got an influx of business,
yeah,
and it
and
was
tons of
great.
experience.
And tons of experience. And I wouldn't know what those red flags are now if I hadn't gone through all of those.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so the product I had then versus what we do now is very different in every way. I mean, back then we were doing websites in HTML, and they were these very flat kind of brochure websites where it was just literally, here's the website, the firm does XYZ, and here's our address and email, and like reach out. Like there was no strategy. There was nothing called a call to action. I mean, it was so different in the way that people interact with websites back then
Yeah.
versus now. And so we're dealing with a much more sophisticated user. And so you can't have a website that looks like that anymore.
Right.
It
It's
doesn't
usually
work.
yeah, that's going to be like a red flag if I go
Yeah.
to search my lawyer and they have like the worst, it's
Yeah.
basically a business card in website form.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
or
It,
it's
it
going to be
makes
like,
you assume that everything else in their firm and their office and everything else they do is outdated
yeah,
and not in a good way. Like it's not vintage. It's
yeah,
outdated and like dusty. And you're assuming that maybe your case will sit there on their desk for the next 10 years as well. And it just doesn't feel like they take initiative, like they're on top of things. It's just a bad first impression.
yeah, extremely bad. Um, okay, so you came up with the co-counsel program.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Um, I love the topic of service design
Yes.
and because we have the ability as entrepreneurs to design how we choose to serve our clients. And, a lot of service-based businesses in the past would just be like, okay, charge for hours, an
Yeah.
hour of work, you get an hour of money.
Right.
And the shift has been dramatically against that. And
Right.
for lots of good reasons that I think are really important. But you need to think about how you're putting together your services that
Yeah.
somebody will buy it in like a flat fee.
Right.
So, when, tell me a little bit about your process to come up with what that looks like in this kind of
Yeah.
flat fee structure.
It's really complicated. And it was complicated to kind of go through the process and figure out what works for the kinds of clients that we have. And I've also seen it with a lot of law firms. There's some really cool firms that are putting together these kinds of packages. And a lot of people are putting it under this umbrella of fractional. So fractional, like
Mhm.
you guys have this awesome fractional CFO program. We kind of are also calling it sort of like a fractional CMO because people can sort of understand that idea. Um, and a lot of people are doing it in different ways. So there's places where this fractional C whatever level service that you're getting is almost like you're hiring a part-time person in that sort of capacity. That's not what we're doing
Mhm.
because for a lot of reasons, because that's not what we find that works. That's not what we find that our clients want. And I've been working on this for probably a year and a half or so and looking at everything that's out there, not just for marketing, but for all these kinds of services. So the first step is doing a lot of research, like figuring out what's out there, what are the things people are offering, and if that type of thing makes sense, but then talking to your clients and knowing what they're coming to you for. So if I put out some random package that just seems like a good idea to me, that makes no sense. Like I have to
Right.
know that somebody is interested in it. So that was the other thing. We have clients in a lot of different types of businesses. So just because they're all lawyers, their businesses are so significantly different.
Hmm.
Their clients, their positioning, their messaging, their marketing. If you are a high-end personal injury firm in Manhattan or business law firm, more like in Manhattan, and your competition is ridiculous. Like there are other firms in the same building with the same address that are doing similar things, and your hourly rate is insane. Um, Versus like a small town estate planning firm where they're sitting down with families. Their clients are maybe elderly. They might not spend a lot of time online, but they might Google you. They at least want to see a picture of what you look like and see that you look friendly or whatever. But they're not going to spend a lot of time searching and doing things online versus maybe another firm that does business law in some other part of the country. Like they are totally different businesses. They have different clients, different messages. So to figure out a package that works, basically it requires a lot of customization.
Yeah.
So we put words and messaging around what this package is supposed to do, which is create a whole plan for a year. And we meet quarterly and we execute on that. And we execute on that plan and make sure that we are laser focused. And usually that involves a lot of other things that pop up, kind of like whack-a-mole, and we say no. So, like, this is
Mhm.
not, TikTok was not something we ever talked about.
Right.
Maybe it was. There are firms we do stuff like that for.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't part of the plan, then part of our job is to say, let's stay the course. Let's be patient. Let's make sure that what we're planning has the room and the air to breathe so that it can work. And we're not going to get distracted with all of this other stuff. So that means a lot of different things to different firms. And depending on the level of depth and work that we're going into for those different firms, it's going to be a different budget as well. But
Mhm.
we sit down at the beginning and say, okay, let's talk about all the possibilities. Where are we seeing gaps? Where are we seeing opportunities? What is the work that we really need to accomplish in the next 12 months? And then we lay it out and then we figure out what the budget's going to be. And then they can count on a flat monthly rate, whatever that number is that varies depending on the firm, but they can count on it. And they don't have to say, okay, this month we're doing a website and that's going to be $20,000, but then next month we want to do this and I don't know where we're going to get the money. It's just otherwise, trying to calculate a budget and how where you're going to get the spend is impossible because
Yeah.
some things are one fee and some things are monthly and some things are quarterly and it's just messy. So we take all the marketing costs, put them into one bucket, divide it, and then make a plan, and then we handle it. So for a lot of these firms, they're in growth mode and they don't have time to sit and like nitpick over every little decision, so we just hand over, okay, here's everything, review it, double check everything, and then we will handle everything.
Yeah. That has to provide a lot of value to
Yeah.
a firm. I love what you said about listening to your clients and
Yeah.
what they want. I find that that is the number one part of the service design
Yeah.
that sometimes people miss. And
Yeah.
it's the most important because you can think that something's very, very, very important and
Right.
everybody
It
should
doesn't
pay
matter.
for it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or, but sometimes people don't value those things. So
Right.
I've run into this where we don't necessarily sell that thing that we know is very important and we're going to do regardless. We don't talk about it and sell it necessarily, but it is part of our internal process.
Right.
So I think people should think about that too. Like we might say like, "Oh, we're going to redo your chart of accounts."
Yeah.
And most people are going to go, "Well, that's not very like people don't want to pay for it first because it's not very
Right.
sexy. It doesn't sound
Yeah.
great."
Yeah.
But we know
I
that
love
it's the
charts.
foundation. Yeah.
So
But
I'd be
like,
like, okay.
yeah. We know it's like a huge foundation for what we do and how to have an accurate budget and have an accurate forecast or like have a forecast that we can use and functionally look at. So it's a foundation structure for us.
Yeah.
But some of it is like how you might need to do something for your clients,
Right.
but how do you communicate it to them that it's what they need, but also like being reactionary or being like listening to them and designing something that sounds great for them too.
So where we start is with a strategy meeting for sure.
Mhm.
So we can't make any decisions about tactics and how we're going to execute until we know what we're doing. And
Yeah.
so we sit down and usually firms are in one of three buckets, very broad buckets. So they're either just starting
Mhm.
or they're going through, so we call that kind of a new growth mode, where they're either just starting or they're just starting over. So like they are, bringing in a whole new team, they're merging with another firm, they're changing their name, or they have just really abandoned their marketing for years and years and they haven't done anything. And so now this is the moment, or they're a brand new firm. So they're starting like a new. So that's kind of one bucket. So that's like, let's get off the ground and be and get out there, get some awareness. So this whole next year, on my podcast, I'm focusing on this marketing funnel. And so I feel like this is some place that not a lot of people talk about. It's kind of boring, like this chart of accounts you were talking about, but it's kind of the backbone of all marketing. And so this group that I'm talking about is sort of top of the funnel. So if you picture an upside down triangle where the wide part is at the top of the funnel is awareness and interest.
Mm,
And when you are doing things to get awareness and interest, you are going to say things differently, act differently, approach your client in a different way than when you're at the middle or the bottom of the funnel. So you could be using social media both in all three areas of that funnel, but you're going to be doing it differently based on what you're trying to do. And you should be doing the whole funnel all the time. So this is where like a whole year plan and a team to execute it comes in because it's a lot.
yeah.
And without doing all of it, this is where you have this roller coaster of marketing
Yeah.
where it's like hot and cold and,
Feast or
it's feast or
famine.
famine. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So in that new group, that first group I was describing, where it's getting launched, getting off the ground, getting or kind of restarting, you start at that top of the funnel. You're trying to get awareness and interest. So imagine it's sort of like a dating thing. You're not asking them to marry you yet. You're not asking them to buy. Like it's weird. It's awkward. It doesn't feel right. And you're going to immediately turn people off if you are doing that at the top of the funnel. So, top of the funnel, awareness and interest, you're doing a lot of here I am. This is what I offer. This is what I know. This is what I'm an expert in. I know that when you, as a client, are at this point, you are just aware that you have a problem. You're not
Mm,
necessarily interested in a solution yet. That's step two. You're just aware. So, you're kind of out there, just kind of browsing around. You're probably on social media, maybe Googling, and it's questions about um, what does a divorce look like very top,
mhm.
level questions. Um, or so it wouldn't probably be criminal defense because that's more urgent and that kind of quickly goes down to the bottom of the funnel. So it would be more like divorce, maybe family law, estate planning, business law, that kind of thing. Okay, so then when you get to that second phase, then it's interest. And then you start to answer those questions. You show that you are the expert, that you have the answers. You're still not asking to marry them or for the sale yet because it's too soon. Okay, so then the second middle part of the funnel and the middle part of our bucket is more of our marketing co-counsel plan. You've got an established firm. You're looking for ongoing main kind of support. You've got some business. You've made some money, and you just need it to be good. You need it to be consistent. You need to be present, and then you need to keep that funnel filled. So that's kind of the marketing co-counsel program. And moving through that middle part of the funnel is when people are asking questions, they're interacting with you. You need to show that you've got results, that you have the answers, that they can interact with you. And then the last part is where they've already converted, they've become a client,
Mhm.
or they're in the conversion process. And then you're nurturing that relationship because
Mhm.
we all know that getting a repeat client is so much more valuable and easy than starting the funnel over. So just
Yeah.
getting that, nurturing that client, sending out maybe email campaigns or letters or Christmas gifts or whatever the case might be. Um, but that middle and the bottom of the funnel is where it falls apart for most firms because they're
Mm,
like, oh, I've got a lead. And so now I'm just going to like quick do the work and like I'm busy and I'm not going to think about how I need to market to these people still because they're
right.
in the door. And then that's where once again you get that roller coaster because you're not following up and they're not thinking about how they might need your services again a year later
Mhm.
because you're not doing anything to encourage that business.
Right. Or it may not be that person that uses the services again, but you want them to
Exactly.
not forget about you because they might be really great referrals. Like,
Exactly.
I went through a divorce. I had a divorce attorney. Um, hopefully I'll never have to be a
Right.
repeat
Yes,
client
100%.
of
Yeah.
her, but I've given her, I've referred her to anybody who ever
Yeah.
approaches me on, going through a divorce because I'm like, she was the best person I talked to during the process. But, it's interesting because I haven't heard from her. So
Yeah.
like the further you get away from that, the more like out of sight, out of mind.
And
But
I'm
yeah,
sure
that.
she has services. Like maybe she does estate planning as well. Maybe she does
Mhm.
other things that I'm not a divorce attorney, so I don't know what that service would be. But as a divorce attorney, if you're listening, there's got to be something that you can follow up on
Yeah.
and just create an email campaign. And usually when we do those, they instantly have a return on whatever you're spending, whatever to create that email campaign. Within pretty much the first email or two, all of a sudden, people are like, oh, yeah, you're right. I do need you to help with this thing. And then,
Mhm.
bam, there's the cost of the email campaign, not to mention goodwill and just staying top of mind and the marketing value and all of that stuff. So, if there's one thing that you get out of this conversation, it's just consider that whole funnel and make
Yeah.
sure the whole funnel is full. And that's usually where most people get overwhelmed with marketing and they can't figure out how to kind of organize it and think about it. And if you can pretty quickly like draw a triangle and say, okay, where am I doing good? Where am I doing nothing? And
Yeah.
where am I doing something but it could be better? And then right there, like there's your marketing plan.
Yeah.
That you don't need to do a big like 14 page, presentation on it. Just find some places where you've got some holes.
I love that because that is not just law firms. That is
No, no,
any
no. This is
service
yeah,
business. It is absolutely, I mean, I'm thinking for my own business, like how am
yeah.
I, the gaps in those different places. But
Yeah, no, this is marketing strategy 101
yeah,
across all businesses. It is more angled towards service-based businesses because that's who
yeah,
I work with. And I think, retail and all of that, it is a little different. And you
yeah.
see how they interact differently, especially just like during the holidays with the mass emails and all of that. And they kind of just go for like, how hard can we go with the emails before we drive you totally crazy? So that's
I
a
know.
whole different approach. But
But
with
it's,
service, yeah, it's more just like staying in touch, staying top of mind,
yeah,
nurturing those relationships and making sure that you have a system in place throughout that whole customer journey. And I'm doing like air quotes because it's sort of a corny phrase that you hear marketing people say all the time, but it is. Like it's that lifespan of when they're first not even necessarily aware of you, but aware of their problem all the way through they've become a client, they're done with you, you're done working with them, and now what can you do with them?
mhm. That's great. I love that. When we did have somebody on the podcast recently, Samantha Irwin, talking about customer journey, and it was kind of eye-opening to think about like every single step along the way. Like how can you have like a pleasant experience
Yeah,
along the way, which is huge. And marketing is a big way that we do that.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I have some questions for you.
Okay.
I feel like we could talk about that for a long time, but we have a
Yeah,
limited amount of time that we can talk on
sure.
this podcast.
Yeah,
Um, but we like to ask people, or I like to ask people about their businesses. So you've grown
sure.
an agency.
Yeah.
How big is your team right now? Is it just you? Do you have people on the team supporting you? What does that look like?
Yeah, I've got about 15 and it depends on the kinds of projects we're doing. So when we were talking about that marketing co-counsel program, I was purposely kind of vague because the program itself is kind of vague because it's very customized to each firm. So
Hmm.
depending on what we're doing for the firms that we're presently working with, the team grows and shrinks with the needs. So if it's a social media heavy, we bring on more people. My whole team is virtual, and so we can kind of grow and shrink. We don't shrink that much, but but
Yeah.
we grow as needed.
Yeah. Well, like when there's a project and maybe a little bit higher effort, do you have
Right.
mostly employees or contractors? Like
It's
how?
all contractors.
Yeah.
We're all kind of just partners in all of it, and that helps. It helps with the flexibility of
Yeah.
the work and the flow and all of that.
I know with creative work, it really makes sense to kind of keep a lot of contractors because
Yeah.
they also, I mean, your best web designers or maybe your best graphic designers or something are probably doing lots of other work for other
Yeah.
people. And
Yeah.
then you kind of get the benefit of having that person's expertise, the fact that they are doing tons of other work for other people as well.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like it just I keep coming back to this fractional idea of your fractional CFO, my fractional CMO program. I think that the best freelancers and people who have built businesses, you're really getting the best of the best when you work with people at where they want to be worked with. So it's not an employee that's just sitting there and I'm like searching for something for them to do. It's you bring your skills to the table. I don't care how much time it takes. Let's just talk about what I need from you. I'm going to get that out of you. And then you go along your day and do whatever you need to do. And I mean, I'm sure we've both had jobs like in our youth where it was hourly and it just like sucked the soul out of me.
yeah.
And like there's times where I'm like, I'm working 3 times. So I had a time in my life when I was a travel agent, and that is totally hourly, and they can track like every call and the amount of work that you're doing. And I was literally working 3 times as fast as the other ladies that I worked with. And I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this to myself? I'm going to put my phone on hold just as much as they do because I'm not getting my pay does not change based on how many calls I take. And
Mm,
the amount of work that I'm doing, um, it doesn't impact my pay, which that is the worst case scenario. You don't want someone just like warming a chair that doesn't have any kind of input, or they don't care about the outcome because it doesn't impact them. So the fractional programs, whichever version if you're hiring finance or marketing, or I even know someone doing a fractional CEO program,
mm,
you are getting the best of them because they're coming in, they're giving you what you need, and then they're out and they go to the next thing.
yeah.
So it's the opposite of that hourly worker who just slows down because they don't care. It's
Yeah.
it's the opposite of that.
Yeah. I like that. It increases. So if you're hiring those people, it increases your efficiency because people are
Yeah,
only, being paid for actually the work that they're doing.
exactly.
And then if you're looking at hiring one of these agencies, you're getting a higher value for the time that what you're paying for.
Yeah,
And you have the benefit of those people going and seeing other businesses and looking at best
right.
practices and everything.
Yes.
So they're not just looking at your business, which, then you kind of are just looking in a silo, which is not always great. So there's
Right. Yeah.
definitely a lot of
It's
benefits to
so
that.
much more strategic because then I can say, okay, we tried this two
Yeah.
years ago with this other firm and it was a complete failure. And so I'm bringing that experience to you so you don't have to waste that time and money. We already know this didn't work or this totally worked. I have this thing that we did with this other firm and it was amazing. Let's try that because I already know this is a great way to do whatever this thing is.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have any KPIs you track in your business or any metrics that are important to you?
Yeah, I love charts and I love Excel as much of a creative person as I am. I do think that like design is it's not just art and it's not just creativity. You're using both parts of your brain. So
Yeah.
you really have to align a system or a plan or the look of something with its outcome. So I love all of that stuff. I of course track profit, like all the income profit, and then I sort it out by where it's coming from. So what kind of not where it's coming from, but what kind of program. So is it we do a lot of website support. So ongoing maintenance plans and so a lot of our clients from those 15 years ago have just been on these maintenance plans for years and years. And because they, in their mind, are our client, we are the first person they think of when they need anything marketing related.
Yes. Hmm.
So that is the easiest way to number one, get some great recurring income
Hmm.
and then stay top of mind because they already have my email. They got an invoice from me like 2 weeks ago. They're just if they have a question or something comes up, they're just gonna email me rather than why would they go to Google, try to find somebody else, whatever. We've been working together for years and years. Even if I haven't touched their website in like 6 years, they're going to come to me first. And
Yeah.
that is one of my best sources of recurring income, but also new projects.
Yeah,
So
that's
as long as
great.
we take care of them, so I track that. I track, the maintenance plans, and then the different kinds of programs that we have, and then so that I can see kind of over time that is really shifted. Like that pie chart has gone from being 80% new projects to we're down to like 15 or 20% new projects where all of our recurring income is, most of our income.
That's so good. I love
It's
it.
so much, it's so much better. And the evolution of my business is so much more of a better life too. I
Yes.
mean, I I only work with lawyers.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, especially in the first 5-ish years, the personalities that are coming in, and when they're coming in and they're price versus value based, there was some harsh conversations, and I have very thick skin, but learning those red flags and learning when it's not a good fit, and finding those the ideal clients is also really important just for your mental health, like just keeping
Yes.
yourself sane.
Oh my goodness, so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah, but also knowing that, okay, those great clients, so those are the ones that are gonna stick around. They're gonna sign up for my maintenance plan. They enjoy working with me. They see the value, and then they're gonna come back in a couple years because,
Yeah,
websites don't last forever.
they don't. They do
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
I
So
love it.
you're asking about KPIs. What else do we track? I track, we use ClickUp for
Mhm.
everything. I have
Mhm.
this amazing uh, team in England that in the last year built out our systems, and it is so slick and stuff that I could never have done on my own. They have these automations, and so um, we keep track of all the steps of our projects. It's
Mhm.
very detailed. We keep track of, I'm trying to think of what else we keep track of. There's so
That's
many
great.
things in
Yeah.
there.
Those
But
are
yeah, I
great.
mean,
Like,
money-wise, yeah.
for us, like, really keeping it really simple, like, just a few, like, what are those really high level things? So I'm hearing, your key numbers, like, for, obviously profit, and
Yeah.
then that recurring revenue of the maintenance programs, like, those probably are really top ones.
Yeah.
Um, I wanna be respectful of your time, and I don't wanna let you go, but I need to. Um, so I have one last question for you, but
Okay.
before I do that, I'm gonna point everybody to your website, which
Oh,
is
sure.
conroycreativecounsel.com,
Yep.
so people can go and look that up. So the last question I have for you is, what is the best piece of financial advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, I've read so I really the first thing that popped in my mind was profit first. And I'm sure you've heard people say this a lot.
Mhm.
But I'll never forget that I had a babysitter obviously a while ago. I was little. And she literally would cash her check and put it in envelopes in the same way that he describes in the book. So it really resonated with me in terms of, I knew that my money was going in all the right places, but for me to organize it in actual separate accounts and make sure that everything was being populated in the right way, that was a game changer for me. I'm sure I'm going to think of some other piece of advice that someone actually gave me in like an hour. But that was the first one. I feel like
Yeah.
that's such a great way, especially I kind of wish I had done that from the beginning. But the book only came out a few years ago. So
Mhm.
that's when I switched. And all of a sudden it was like, I can just open my accounts and instantly see where everything stands. And
Yeah.
that's really valuable to just quick, have that glance.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
that's
recommend
Mike
that book.
Michalowicz. Mike
Yeah.
Michalowicz. The book is Profit First. Yeah, I know that's been a really impactful way to look at finances for a lot of people. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, Karin. So besides the website that I just mentioned, is there any other place that people can connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on every social media platform because, we try it all out and make sure that, we kind of figure things out before we do anything for our clients. So I'm on every one. It's all linked on the website, though, on our website. So if you want to find me, you can search for my name or just go from the website. I'm on LinkedIn and all of them.
Love it.
We're also on YouTube with the podcast, and that's doing really well there too. So there's some really good content there.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. You've been doing podcasts for 3 years, right?
Yeah, we're starting
Almost
the
3
third
years?
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been awesome. Like I wasn't sure if it was going to last this long, but we're still going strong.
I love it. I love it. It's all about that consistency.
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on
You're
Financial
welcome.
Clarity.
Thank you for
great.
having me. It was a fun conversation.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.